So I'm going to show you how to make a mischievous little penguin, Christmas penguin, ready for a snowball fight. So this is the ultimate goal of what we're going to make today. So to start with, I want to get all my supplies. One of the most important things is making sure you have really clean hands before you begin, because any oil or grime on your hand can get transferred to the clay, especially the white. So it's good to wash your hands really thoroughly before you start, and even maybe have some baby wipes handy so that you can really clean your hands in between color changes, especially if you're going from a darker color like red to a lighter color like white. So very important to be ready to go, clean hands. So I have the different clays that I'll be using for this. So black for the penguin's body and eyes, white for the snowballs, and partly with the penguin's body, green for his scarf, red for his scarf and his earmuffs, and then a little teeny bit of orange. We won't use all of this clay, I just gathered just to make sure I had enough of each for his beak and feet. The tools that I tend to use, these are kind of my most favoritist, the ones I use most often. Got a knife just for cutting, pair of scissors, does a lot of the same things. Something with a pokey end. This could be even like a toothpick, so you can do some like poking if you need to. And then, and I don't always use some of these. This one's probably my most favorite. It has a little curve. I think a spoon could probably replace this one, or if you happen to have a tool with a rounded end, you'll be able to use that as well. And then I do have my mirror that will serve as the base, and you will actually bake your figurine directly on this. It can go in the oven. Also can sign the bottom of it with your initials or name, partly to help distinguish you from other people who might be baking theirs at the same time, and then partly just to have your artist signature on there. So there's our mirror, and we're gonna get started. So get my mirror ready, and I'm gonna start working with the base. I want to make the penguin's body, so I don't really need all this black. I'm just gonna get some. I need some for later too for some other parts, so I'm gonna set that to the side somewhere. And sometimes the clay is a little hard to work with in the beginning, but once you get working with it, it softens up and it's a little bit easier. And I'm just gonna kind of roll it into a ball. Try to make sure I get rid of any creases. If you do have them, you can re-roll it, or you can also just kind of rub it with your thumb, and they do tend to kind of disappear. My penguin's body is going to have kind of a head part and a body part, and you can achieve this by doing actually two separate pieces and then joining them and working to fuse them together, or you can kind of roll your fingers back and forth between the middle and just start to develop a head part with like a little more narrow neck. So after doing some, working with my fingers to kind of roll and shape the head, and then I smoothed out maybe marks that came about in that process, I have the basics of my penguin body. So now we're going to add a big white circle for both the belly and the head area. We won't connect them. We won't really need to, because the scarf is going to cover up that area anyway. So I get my white, and this is where we want to be really careful about that cross-contamination, because you can have some under your fingernails that you didn't notice. So I cleaned my hands in between this. Get some white, pull off a little bit, and then I want to, that's a pretty small amount, I want to use my fingers or maybe the palm of my hand to get a nice circle. And then I'm going to squish it so it's kind of flat now. And this is going to serve as my penguin's belly. So I'm going to put that there for right now. And then I want to do the same thing, probably a smaller little sphere here. And that's going to be his face. So I'm going to put that there. So I have the beginnings of his belly and the beginnings of his face. And now I want to be careful because I don't want any smearing. I don't want black coming onto my white, but I'm going to work to push the edges down a bit and smooth it out so it doesn't look quite like two really distinct layers. So just by kind of using my fingers to push the edges down. So now that I have the belly and face area smoothed out a little bit, I'm ready to add a little bit more detail then to my penguin's face. So I'm going to get my orange, and I'm going to get a really like teeny amount of it. So I'm pulling off the end. I'm going to circle, roll it into a ball, and it's pretty small, and you can, you know, play around with the size you want if you like a bigger nose or a smaller one or a bigger beak. And just stick it on there. Oh, here in mine. Stick it on there, and then kind of pinch it into a little bit more of like a triangle type shape there. So now I'm going to be adding eyes, and so I'm going to get my black clay, and I am going to get a teeny tiny lump. Like, I'm going to roll it into a ball, and I want to get two, so I'm going to get two and try to make sure they're the same size. Notice how tiny these are. They're smaller than you might think, because they do spread out when we put them on, and so we don't need very big eyes, and so it's a pretty small ball that we're going to be using. This might actually even be a little too big. So I'm going to put that on that side, and then his other eye on the other, after I've, you know, rolled them into more spherically shaped things. Then I'm going to push it down and see how much it's spread out. And I haven't even really pushed the sides down too much yet, and partly that's because I'm going to add the white. So if you look at our final product, you'll notice that we have these two dots. They give the eye a little bit more depth. You can do one or two, some people even do three. So the thing about it is it's going to be the tiniest amount of white clay that you can really get. So what I do is I tend to take my white clay and kind of pull the end into a tip, and then I use sometimes my fingernail or even my little cutter, and I cut off this just teeny tiny amount, and then I roll it into a ball. You can see how small that is. So I put one at the bottom of the eye, and then one a little bit larger, just a little, still a tiny amount. Roll it into the ball at the top. And I'm going to do that on both sides, and then use my tools to kind of press it down and manipulate the shape a little bit to what I want. So now I have my penguin's face finished, where he has a beak and eyes, and we're going to just continue to add some of the detail to the rest of him. So now might be a nice time to add his feet. So his feet are little orange balls that we kind of cut slits in to make look more like feet. So I'm going to get my orange and pull off some and get equal sized pieces, and then they're pretty small, about the size of a pea. And I'm going to roll them into balls and then place them kind of on the edge so that they stick out a bit. I'm just pushing them down to kind of fuse the back into the black a little bit so that they stay together. And I'm going to use my knife or something similar to just cut some lines in there to add a little bit of detail. And then now I'm going to work on really getting him fused to this mirror. So we're going to be working with him attached to the mirror. From now on, if he falls off, we just push him back in. If he falls off after baking, he can just be super glued onto the mirror. So there we have our penguin body almost complete. Let's work on then the earmuffs. So the earmuffs are going to be made from our red. So we're going to need to pull off a small piece, break it into two equal sized, and then I'm going to roll them into a ball. Make sure they're about the same size. Then I'm going to get some more, and then I'm going to roll it into a nice thin log, and that is going to then serve, can use that to make the top part of his earmuff. So I'm going to lay that log over his head. You can see how much, I've made it way bigger than I need to, so I'm going to just snip off the piece. Save that for later. I have that, looks like this from this side. Now that's raised up quite a bit, so I want to use either my finger or one of my tools to just push that down so it's a little flatter, like they would more realistically lay on his head. So I do that. Use my fingers to shape it a little bit. And then for his earpiece, I'm just going to flatten that ball and stick it on there. And do the same on the other side. I want to try to get so they kind of match, so it's a little symmetrical. There's his ear muffs. Next we're going to do his scarf, which is a little bit more complicated. So to make the scarf, to start off with, we're going to need to get our red and green. And you're going to make little balls of red and green that are pretty small. Notice we work in pretty small amounts other than the body. So a little bit of red, a little bit of green, and I'm just going to make a pattern of them, red and green and red and green in little spheres. They don't have to be exactly perfect, so if you get one that's a little bit bigger, that's okay. That can work. And we're going to continue on to make a pattern. So I have my little pattern here that I've made. I think in this one I have about 6 of each color. There isn't really a hard fast rule, it just depends on how long you want the scarf. And so then once I've done that, I'm going to start kind of smoothing out those edges between them. I don't want them, I want the distinct lines, but I also want it to stay together. So I do, just kind of smooth it into kind of like I'm making a Christmas snake is what it kind of looks like. So it's getting longer because I want it to be able to wrap all the way around my penguin's neck and leave a little bit of leftovers for snipping. So I think I'm getting it about the right length, and so now I am going to flatten it a bit. Not too hard because I want to be able to get it off the surface. I'm going to flatten it. Looks a little bit more like my scarf. This is a good opportunity for one of my tools to help me lift it up. I'm going to lift up my little snake, my Christmas snake, and now I'm going to wrap it around the neck. I made mine a little longer than I might normally have done, and you can always snip. I might do that. So I wrap it around the neck, and then if I have enough, I might twist these a little so that I get this. And I do think mine's a little longer than I want, so I'm going to cut off just a little bit. I'm going to cut off, I think, the red on this one and just some of the green on the other. And now to get that frayed look at the end, this is where my scissors come in really handy. I just cut a couple lines in there, each of those. I have my penguin pretty much done as far as his body. The only things I have left to do are his arms and his snowballs, which we can kind of do together. So to make his arms, I'm going to get clay and break off a piece and break it into 2 halves. And I want them to be about the same size, so if I realize one's too big as I start to work with it, I'm going to modify it. And then I'm going to shape it a little bit like a flat teardrop. That's going to be my kind of wing shape. This is the end of the wing. This is the round part's the part that will go back into the body. And I'm going to put that there. I'm going to come back to it and do a little bit more work in a second. I'll show you. And then one wing is going to have a snowball in it. So I'm going to make my wing flat teardrop, and I'm going to get a piece of white, roll it into a nice ball without any seams, and then I'm going to have that then be in his hand. So I got to fuse those together, and then kind of I'm going to touch it to his body. Now I'm going to go back using a tool or my thumb and kind of push that in a bit so that it is fused a little bit more and won't come off during baking. So you can see I've done that to both sides. I've fused the back in a bit and done a little bit of shaping. And now I can put on my snowballs. I just used white clay, 4 different spheres, so you're going to have 5 total snowballs. And then I'm going to place them next to him. This is he's all ready to go. It's going to make kind of a little pyramid. 3 at the base. And then 1 more. We're going to push them down so that they're ready. And then he's going to bake 230 degrees for 30 minutes. And after he has fully cooled, we'll glaze him with something like this. So there we go. And I double check him just to see. I need to